as a human, you can only discover a set amount of risk and opportunities that any path will take you. But having the ability to consult a machine that is getting smarter by the day and eventually knows how you're thinking and how you're talking and how you're processing information, I think you'll be exposed to a bigger set of information that will help you make better judgment and better decisions.
Welcome to the Coursera podcast, where we have conversations with renowned experts and industry leaders to explore global trends impacting the future of education and work. I'm your host, Arunav Sinha, Vice President of Global Communications at Coursera. AI is reshaping industries and economies, and nations that invest in technology, policy, and talent will have the competitive edge. But staying ahead isn't just about building the best AI. It's about leadership in incorporating the technology effectively in our day to day work. Today, we will explore how AI is driving global competitiveness and what skills professionals need to prepare for the future. Joining us is Ylli Bajraktari, President and CEO of a Special Competitive Studies Project, or SCSP, an organization dedicated to ensuring that the US remains a leader in AI and other emerging technologies. Ylli has spent years at the intersection of AI defense and policy, leading efforts at the National Security Commission on AI, serving as the National Security Advisor's Chief of Staff, and holding key roles at the Pentagon. Ylli, welcome to the Coursera podcast. We are excited to have you.
Thanks for having me, Arnav.
So let's dive in. When SCSP was founded in 2021, it set out to ensure that the US remains a leader in AI, and it's definitely a big priority for the current administration as well. How has its mission evolved as AI continues to advance?
Thank you so much. And again, it's a pleasure to be here on your podcast. We created SCSP in October of 2021, which is a couple of months before the release of ChatGPT that I think changed the world. And moreover, I think brought the conversation about AI among ordinary people. Initially, not many were tracking how fast AI was developed. You hear the stories of this technology coming that is going to be very transformative for all aspects of our life, from the economy, education, healthcare, or national security. But until people experience the ChatGPT moment, I don't think anybody was realizing how fast and profoundly changing and transformative this technology will be. I mean, now almost everybody I know around me uses one of the models for whatever they're doing in their daily professional life. A lot of people use it for stuff that they do at home, whether it's like homework, drafting emails, connecting with friends and family. But I think it has been a transformative moment because I don't think in the history of civilization we have had such a big technology that reached masses so fast.
In fact, I was looking at one study. ChatGPT happened to be the fastest adopted 200 million users in the history of mankind. So it's definitely something that we see as consumer AI. Before, AI was all about builders. Now it is a lot about users.
I think you're right, Arnav. I think one of the statistics to build on yours is that I think it took Gmail 5 years to get to 200 million users. And as you noted, I think it took ChatGPT 3 months to get to 200 million users.
That's right. But Ylli, you have an interesting background. You work across government, from Pentagon to the White House. What inspired you to focus on your career on AI and emerging technologies?
It's a great question, Arnav. So I talk to a lot of young people, not that I'm old, but we have a lot of young interns here that come to DC. They're motivated to serve. And I tell them that life is never linear. You can never predict 3 steps in your careers about what you're going to do or how you're going to get promoted in your jobs or in your profession. So I think between 2014 and 2017, I was fortunate to work in the Pentagon in the office of the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So this is the second most highest ranking decision maker in the Pentagon. His name was Bob Work, who served for 3 years as Deputy Secretary of Defense. And he gave me the AI bug because he was the first person, I think, in the Pentagon that started talking about the artificial intelligence and how we need to adopt this in order for our country to stay ahead. And I think, but I didn't have a lot of time. When you work in these jobs, you really don't have a lot of time to learn about AI or anything else just because the day is so dynamic. You basically move from a crisis to crisis to crisis at those levels. And so I had the fortune to spend 1 year at the National Defense University as a fellow from 2018 to 2019. And when I went there, the people were so kind enough to give me time and space to do whatever I wanted. And the one thing I decided I wanted to do there was to deep dive on AI. I was always intrigued by AI. There were not many books at that time frame about AI, maybe a handful of them. This is the period when Kai-Fu Lee's book was really big. And so I spent about 6 months really deep diving on AI, taking online classes in Coursera. I remember Andrew Ng's first class that I took, and I really liked it. I mean, I got into learning the technical piece, not so much becoming a computer scientist, but just actually understanding what goes into making the AI. I started talking to a lot of experts. I read a lot of books, as I mentioned. So that was the formative years for me to really get into AI and understanding the implications. I think I was fortunate because right at the same time, the China dynamic became predominant in our national security discourse. Because if you look back in 2017 and 18, this is the time when I think we wake up as a country and realize that this is not the China we wanted and we hoped for. This is the China that has its own ambition, its own national security interest, its own vision for the world. And part of that vision for the world is China to dominate all technology stack,
Hmm.
primarily the artificial intelligence, because that would give them the head start over the United States and the rest of the world. And so it just happened that while I was doing AI, China started becoming predominant in my conversations and the national security discourse in Washington. So while I was at the National Defense University, United States Congress created a bipartisan commission called National Security Commission on AI. I didn't know much about these commissions. When you look back, Congress usually creates these commissions on two purposes. One is, something went wrong and they need a bipartisan group of luminaries, experts to look at what went wrong. And I think the most famous commission in that sense is the 9/11 Commission. After the tragic incidents of 9/11, Congress created a 9/11 Commission, and the purpose of that commission was to look back and see what went wrong and provide recommendations for that never to happen again. But also, Congress creates these commissions when there is an uncertainty about certain issue, when there is a lack of policy directions for our country. And then our departments and agencies don't know what to do with it. So Congress then steps in and creates a commission. And so I think AI entered that space because everything Congress was hearing from private sector in 2018 was, hey, there's a powerful technology coming our way. We haven't seen this kind of a transformative technology since electricity, once would say, a railroad, the other camp would say. So we need to get ourselves organized for this because this is different. This is not just next level computer chips. This is really a transformative technology. And then the other camp, really, that I think Congress was getting a lot of briefings on was the China ambition. That China has a strategy, they're putting enormous resources, they're getting organized because they believe this is the technology that would leapfrog them towards the world leadership. And so once that commission was created, Congress identified 15 individuals, some of the most renowned technologies, private sector academic leaders, former high level government officials. And then I received a call from Eric Schmidt, former Google CEO, who was appointed the chair of that commission to serve as the executive director. Basically, my job was to set up the process, set up the battle rhythm of the commission, get ourselves organized, identify staff, and really I think the timing was, as I say, in life, everything is about timing. As I was getting more and more into AI, this call came at the perfect timing. And so we worked on the commission for about 2.5 years from 2019 to 2021. The mission of the commission was really straightforward. I don't know. It was like looking at what AI can help us do to achieve our national security objectives. This wasn't a commission that I'd like to underscore that had to look at what are the economic aspects of AI, what AI impact is going to have on education or healthcare. Because the task came from the Armed Services Committee on the Hill, my job was really to focus on what are departments and agencies doing with AI right now and what they can do more to achieve our national security objectives. So it was primarily really focused on national security. We submitted to Congress a really thick report in March of 2021, 759 pages of the report, that really, I think, jump started the conversation about why AI was important for our federal agency to start adopting it because of the moment we were in, both on the technology race with China, but also how AI matured at that point. And then after that, when ChatGPT moment happened, I mean, this transformed the world. Eric and I started a special competitive studies project, which really, as you mentioned, the goal is how do we ensure that as AI gets more used by a lot of people, and adopted by our economy and our society, what are the transformative issues that it's going to have on all aspects of our life? And ultimately, how does AI ensure that we are better positioned for the future, especially the one that we have to compete against China?
Two things emerge out of your remarks. Whenever big transformation shifts happen, one is policy, how government, who have the widest influence on our public and civic life, what kind of policies they form. And secondly is leadership. And why that is important, because compared to some of the previous technology shifts like cloud and mobile, which was largely relegated to the tech teams, like the CTOs and CIOs of the world taking the lead and building that policy for the company. But AI has emerged to be a board level discussion and at the highest level on the government side as well. How do you think how SCSP has talked about AI redefining leadership and decision making, and what skills do leaders need to succeed in an AI driven world?
That's a great question, Arnav. So I think for the next couple of years, we will exist in this world of whether you call it co-piloting or human machine teaming. But I think we're entering a space in which never in the history of civilization, or human civilization at least, we have had a moment in which human machine will give you better options than just human alone. And so when you talk about leadership, every time I had to support a leader or work for a leader in all my government jobs, my number one job was to provide him or her with options. What do we need to do vis-a-vis this country, this region, or this issue? And human brain can generate a set of options, let's say three. But if you now work with a machine in any of these languages, whether it's Google, OpenAI, or Anthropic, you will be probably able to generate five, six, seven options. And I think that will always be better than three. Ultimately, I believe in the next 3 to 5 years, the humans will make the ultimate decision with which options we go. Because we always argue, humans should have the ability and the last say in whatever course of actions we take. But we have to recognize that we live in the moment that the human machine teaming will give you much, much better options than human brain alone. And I think the future will be to those that know how to adopt to this reality and utilize this space versus those that ignore it and fail to adopt this new reality. I read somewhere a really nice bumper sticker. It said, "Humans will not lose jobs from machines. Humans will lose jobs from human machines."
That's right. Humans who have AI. Yes, absolutely. So I want to test that hypothesis a little bit, Ylli. And especially in high stakes decision making. Means in the past, high stakes decision making often focused on mitigating the risk. But what about opportunities? Means do you think AI can help us unlock better decision making with opportunities in mind compared to how humans have traditionally made decisions about risks?
That's a great question, Arnav. I think the next era really is really discovering the balance between both, because I think what this human machine interaction will give us is really also an ability to outline both risk and opportunities. As a human, you can only discover probably in your journey a set amount of risk and opportunities that any path will take you. But having the ability to consult a machine that is getting smarter by the day and eventually knows how you're thinking and how you're talking and how you're processing information, I think you'll be exposed to a bigger set of information that I think will help you make better judgment and better decisions. Nothing will be perfect because I don't think we will enter a world in which every information that comes out of these machines will be perfect. But at least you will know deep down, even today, these machines are not perfect. Even today, you can see like the limitations that they have in reasoning or whatever you prompt, the outcome that it gives you. But they're getting better and better, Aruna. And I think the more you use them and the more you find that perfect spot of like, how much do you want to use them versus how much to ignore them, I think that will be a much better outcome than you alone sitting down and trying to come up with the risk and opportunities.
That's right. And you had an early preview of how AI is reshaping some of the government decision making and workflows as well. Obviously, it is changing industries and reshaping jobs. But can you talk a little bit about how SCSP emphasizes that the US, to maintain its strategic advantage, it's crucial to integrate AI into day-to-day operations, and how US is ensuring that its workplace is equipped to use AI effectively, and what gaps exist in our current education and training system?
That's a great question, Aaron. So look, leaving aside, so like adoption among federal workforce right now. If we agree that this technology is going to be transformative, then obviously it's going to have a huge impact in the future of labor, right? And so when you look at labor, there are different facets of that, whether or not administrative labor or manufacturing. I think most of the studies right now are arguing that AI will impact the future of labor, and therefore we need to go through a massive reskilling and retraining of our labor. Some jobs will die. The favorite story that I read in one of the books was, we used to have candle lighters in the streets of New York at the beginning of last century. With the invention of electricity, that profession died within 5 years, and their union disappeared within 7 years. So there will be professions that AI will probably erase forever. But I think we as a country, we owe it to our future to do everything possible to retrain and reskill labor for this era, because this is going to come. And I think the nation that is faster in terms of adoption and in terms of understanding the reskilling and retraining piece of this will move much, much faster in the future. And then to your questions about how federal government can adopt. Look, federal government does a lot for this country, in delivering services, in delivering goods, in delivering prosperity and security. What most of the people do in federal government is really related to writing, training, moving logistics, and whatnot. And AI has a piece on everything we do, both in private sector but also at the federal level. And so I think we just have to think really closely and strategically, how do we move the federal workforce or even at the state level to understand and adopt AI, and what portions of their job this will help make their job easier and better and faster. Because ultimately, I spent 12 years in government now. Most of the time, you spend a lot of time writing and moving paper at different levels at the speed that should be much, much faster. I think AI can change that. We talk about back office responsibilities, timesheet, travel sheet, cyber defenses, all these things. AI can help you move much, much better. If it took me before maybe a day or two to write a memo, I can write that memo now within minutes. And then you can share that memo with your colleagues to get their feedback to make it even better before you send it to your principal or before you send it to decision making. So I think it's a matter that we owe it to our country to train and reskill labor and workforce at all levels so we are ready for the future. I just received an email from the county superintendent that argues about providing now opportunities to teachers for reskilling and adopting AI so they understand what they can achieve with AI while also understanding the risk of AI. So I think as a country we should have a strategy for this. We should never leave a certain aspects of our communities behind, but we should have a strategy as a nation to retrain and reskill labor for this future.
In fact, Ylli, you're taking a major step forward by launching a full-fledged course, which is AI in National Security on Coursera.org. Can you talk a little bit about that course as well as what type of skills will learners walk away with that after completing the course?
Absolutely, Arnav. So we're really thrilled to be partnering with Coursera. And I think what we wanted to do is right now, there's an ocean of courses available for people to understand what AI is, what's happening, how AI is built, how AI is used. We wanted to provide a tailored course for people that work at state and federal level, and they are working on issues related to daily tasks such as writing, memo issuing, decision making, researching, all the mundane things that takes hours if not days for anybody to work wherever they are. And so given that most of our staff has spent decades collectively working in the federal government agencies, whether intelligence agencies, Department of Defense, Department of State, we wanted to provide to our former colleagues who are still working at the state or federal level, so like a window of like how the future looks like where you adopt AI for your daily job. A lot of people still don't understand how to utilize AI for their daily job. Whether you're writing performance evals for your teammates, whether you're writing research memo for your boss or your principal or decision maker, I think a lot of people still don't understand how they can utilize it for their daily job. So we wanted to provide them with an opportunity to see how that would look like if you know how to utilize AI for the purposes of what you do every day.
In fact, one of the unique things about this course is these real world case studies that you've integrated. Can you share an example of how AI is already being applied in government and national security?
I don't think we're there yet. I don't know in terms of like successful adoption at speed and scale that I think we all would thrive to have.
Hmm.
I think through our case examples in our course, we're providing them with some simple examples of like you have to write a research memo all of a sudden because your decision maker, your boss, your principal is traveling to a certain country. So he needs a little bit of background information. He needs a little bit of history of the bilateral relationship between our countries, and so I provide a case example of using these models to build a research memo for the decision maker before his or her trip to that country. From my experience, when I worked inside the government, this could have taken me like 2 weeks to do. It would involve a dozen of people across multiple agencies. But now you can come up with the initial draft within minutes. And then you can spend probably less time coordinating that document with your colleagues so you have a better document to provide to your superior. So I provide a real case example on how it is to use, in this case, Gemini, but almost all the other models have a similar tools now to write these memos.
Yeah, in fact, many people on Coursera who come are also from different kind of institutions. So can you talk a little bit about what learnings other kind of institutions, for-profit companies can apply based on what you're teaching in this course, and more broadly about how government is adopting, what lessons can be learned by other leaders?
Both private sector and public sector spend a lot of time on analyzing, researching, and writing options for the way ahead. Whether or not in terms of investments, whether or not in terms of decisions, whether or not in terms of the military, where you deploy military for particular missions, right? So in all of these instances, you have to do research that is validated and solid. You need lawyers to look at those decisions because ultimately what you pursue in private sector or public sector, it has to be legal and ethical. So I think these models could really jumpstart and accelerate that process for you. And so you would not start from an empty Word document or Google document, but you actually have a solid foundation to where to start from and then build from there, because I think human reasoning and humans are like thoughts built on top of what machine has produced will always get you faster. But I think it will get you much faster to your desired outcome than spending hours deliberating in front of a blank computer on where to start.
In fact, that message will resonate with a lot of people, AI technologists, who might be interested in exploring options of working with the government. So, what are some of the exciting governmental career paths emerging in AI right now? You have been one of the pioneers in advancing this conversation. What kind of roles do you see emerging within both federal, state, and county levels?
It will depend, Arnav, I think, based on the mission of the agencies we have. But let's take, for example, the intelligence community. Our intelligence analysts spend a lot of time going over images, data that comes through, our embassies or through our constellations abroad, and then trying to make sense of all of it. When you think about it, Arnav, the amount of information has only grown exponentially over time that it's impossible for human brain now within 9 hours that you spend in front of your computer or 10 hours to make sense of all of it, right? And so I think now the type of workforce that will emerge in this particular set will be those that know how to work with the machines, those that know how to utilize AI to summarize, shorten, find like the keywords in this massive amount of information they get, and then try to make sense of it much, much faster. So that would be probably one area that is going to emerge really fast out of this, especially with people that are going to get trained and adopt AI in the workforce. As I told you, researching and analyzing documents for anything, whether it's for moving trucks, whether it's for moving troops or moving weapon systems, we spend a lot of time, doing research and analysis, cost estimates, pros and cons of all of our actions. So at least for that analyst or that person that is doing this job, you can have a really, really good start if you adopt and employ AI for what you're doing, because you will be able to have an incredible analysis and ultimately, different options for how to pursue your action.
As we come towards the end of the podcast, I definitely want to ask, you worked at the government on AI policy at the highest level. What's been sort of some of the surprising lessons you've learned along the way?
So, Arunav, I think in most of our history since the end of World War II, technology was developed in government labs. That's where you had the latest and greatest breakthroughs, and that gave us a jump start because of our innovation ecosystem to win the Cold War. AI is probably, I would say, the first technology that comes that the government had to play catch up because it came from private sector. It's still developed by private sector, and private sector is making enormous investments. And so it was an interesting dynamic to see how government is trying to catch up in a technology that is changing so fast almost every day. And then even more surprising thing is how do you even regulate this kind of a technology? If you have one model being updated almost daily or weekly, and as you know, we write policies with a hope that they will last longer than a week. This was the most surprising thing for me, and probably the biggest question for me was how do you stay on top of that? How do you stay ahead of this? Or, worst case scenario, how you mitigate the most vulnerable aspects of this technology. If you cannot put a framework of governments across the entire technology, how at least you can address some of the high impact consequential cases that this technology will hit.
So clearly, it seems like when the problems are changing so fast and technology are changing so fast, a very agile collaboration model of private and public sector would be the path forward.
Absolutely, Arunav. Right now, as we discussed, private sector is in charge of developing and deploying AI, and the government is playing catch up. But we also live at the time when we were facing China, and China has so-called civil fusion, which means their private sector works hand in hand with their government. And in most of the cases, their private sector is controlled by the government just because of the political system that they have. And so when you have this geopolitical competition, you need to find a new model in the United States where you bring government and private sector, and I would argue academia as well, in a much closer collaborative environment to try to stay ahead because the implications will be enormous if China wins this technology race.
Yo, this has been an incredibly productive conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Your insights into AI's role in national security, the workforce, and how it shapes global competition have been truly fascinating.
Thank you for having me, Avardam.
To our listeners, if you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out the free AI in National Security course on Coursera.org. Whether you are in government, technology, or just curious about the AI's impact, this course is a great place to start. If you enjoyed this episode of the Coursera podcast, please rate, review, and share. Until next time, I'm Arunav Sinha. Thank you for tuning in.